Welcome. Today we're going to be creating an animated bubble chart. We're going to be using DataGraph version 5.0 for this demonstration, and I'm going to be showing you from beginning to end how I got this data, how I created this graphic, and how I created the animation. And we're doing this all within DataGraph. There's no programming needed, and it's really not that hard to do. So first of all, my name is Pamela Schultz. Thank you for joining me today. It's always nice on the chat if folks want to let me know where they are and say hello. Last week we had someone in Alaska, we had someone in Sweden. I'm sure there were other countries and states represented as well. Um, but this bubble chart that you're seeing here that's being animated that we're going to make, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the data, but just to comment for anyone who wasn't here last week, that this is an animated bubble graph that was made famous by statistician and physician Hans Rosling. You can see that we had or have fertility on the x-axis, life expectancy on the y-axis, and each one of these points is a country that the size of that point grows throughout the animation. So you'll learn today not just how to make the bubble chart, but how to actually make it move and animate it. I think this is such a cool thing to be able to do within DataGraph, and I don't know that many programs where you could do this again without having to also do some coding behind the scenes. So we're going to do this in 3 steps, and the first thing I want to do is just show you the file that we're going to use. And if you again, we're using DataGraph version 5.0. If you need that version, you could use the old version, but it's, I think it'll be easier if you have the same version that I'm using. But you can get it from our website. You can also get a free trial of DataGraph if you're someone who's new coming to the program. But let me show you what this looks like within DataGraph itself. So this is actually sorry, that was my screen. I have two monitors going. This is the monitor that I wanted to show you. This is a file that actually is available now within our example files. I uploaded this version this morning. So if you open DataGraph, you will see the online example files like you see here. And the first one that you'll now see in this list is the GapMinder dataset. So if you open this example file here, here's the file that you're going to see. Now, first of all, just let me give you a little bit of a tour of this file that we're going to create. If you want to animate this, if you've never done animation within DataGraph, then the first thing to know is that there is a little animation button in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you click that, you will now see the animation moving. The other thing that you'll notice is that in the data table, we have the data for a country. There's a country code here, country name, there's a region, and then we have the data that's really part of this animation. This is fertility, life expectancy, population. There's also another column here that's called the mask name, because what I'm doing here within my animation is I'm only revealing the name of the country when population gets to a certain size. So this is something that I added that I thought was useful, and I've found this to be kind of an interesting thing to play with. So if you want to stop the animation, you go back down to the bottom left and you can click that button again and it stops it. You can also use this slider to scrub through the animation. A couple of other things that I added into this that I think are unique. There is over here in the variables, there's a set variable that if you open this up, oh, actually, sorry, I'm doing the wrong one. The one right above that, not the color scheme, but the one above that has checkboxes that I can check and uncheck to change what data is being shown for what regions of the world. And the slider above that, it changes which countries, based on population, which countries have a label shown. Okay, so to do this file, to create this, there's really 3 main steps that I am going to talk about. One is just getting the data and preparing the data, and that involves downloading the data that you see over here on the left-hand side in these groups. There's one for fertility, life expectancy, population, and then there's also country data. I can hide this kind of summary table here first and just show you this, these data. These all look very similar. You have a country code, you have the year, and you have then the data itself. All of these are in what we would call a flattened version. So these are, very long tables. But what you will notice is that if you scroll down, they have a different number of countries in them. So these aren't all the same. These tables are not things that have a one-to-one correspondence for a particular row as you scroll down the data. And that's one of the reasons why what we do here is we have a single table that has every country listed once. You can scroll down to the bottom. And then we're pulling from our data here the value for fertility, life expectancy, and population based on what my animation variable is down at the left-hand side. And this variable t, that basically this is the year. So again, as I change this, you can see my, over here, you can see how my graph changes, and it's again based on the year. The data is changing. So this is all dynamic. So that's the first thing, setting up the data. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually make the bubble charts. And for each of these steps, what I actually did is I have a group here that you can open up. Actually, I'll go through these steps first: how to get the data. Next, how to make the bubble graph. What you'll see here are 3 different panels that show you the basic steps, where initially all we're doing is plotting the points. And then we go through and we'll scale them based again on the population. And then we will add a color scheme to change the color of the points. This part is actually pretty basic. Once we have the data set up to make the bubble graph is relatively easy. And then there's also a status bar that I created. This is maybe a little bit more of an advanced thing. This isn't completely built into the program, but again, I can show you the steps for that. And then this is all the third part. Once we have the basic structure for the bubble graph, then we can go ahead and format it to create what I have here, this final version. We'll get through as much of that as we can today. So the first part of this, getting the data. Now, what I did is I went ahead and I did a couple of things here to make this easier for you. So if you can get this file, again, this file is, go into the online examples, you'll see GapMinder dataset, and you can open this file up and it will have the data in it. It already has the whole thing prepared that we're going to walk through. But this also gives you steps on step 1 of how to get the data, just where does the data come from. This is from GapMinder.org. And behind every one of these, there are some instructions. So to kind of simplify the user interface here, I'm going to close my data. I actually did that with a Command D, close this data side panel, and I'm going to swap my views. So I'm going to click this little button here to swap the data with my commands, which also contain the instructions here. So this is, again, I just tried to outline these steps as much as possible. You can go to the GapMinder website, and on that website, the one that I give here, gapminder.org/data, they actually have this data in a number of different formats. Oh, and I wanted to say a hello back from England. So we've got one country represented here. I know there's more. And so if you go to this website, you'll see here's the page, you'll see a screenshot of that, and then click on this DDF data model. One of the things about this data that I found was it's available in a number of different formats. You can get Excel spreadsheets, you can get files that we would call a wide file where there's columns for every year. And I had an older version of this template or example file that used that data, but it's actually much easier if we just start with data that's in this nice long or flattened format, as we refer to it. So this is where I started. I kind of looked first at, what data, where I could get the data from. I went to this DDF data model. And then if you go to that page, you can navigate to the individual data sets that we got. To be honest, in setting this up, that was one of the things that took me the most time, was finding the exact table that I wanted, because on that website you'll find links to a number of different GitHub sites where all this data resides. So what I did for you here is I have direct links to each one of these sites on GitHub that has the data. So I'm not going to, go through exactly how I found that, but if you click on one of these links, and I think I already, oh no, I did not do that. So let me click one of these links here. This is the first one, is for fertility. That will open up the link to GitHub. Takes just a moment. And once we have that, you can see you can see the data, and what you want to click is this little link right here. The links to all these tables are also in the description for this video. And so you can go directly to this page, click this link, that will copy the raw contents of this file. And then to get it into DataGraph, all we need to do is, oops, let me go back here. I'll just start with a new file to show you this. So I copied it into my clipboard, and now I just need to paste it in. And there's my data. So the other thing that I did here is I went ahead and I placed these in groups. And to do that, I can just drag, select all of these columns, click this group shortcut button, and now I have my fertility data in a group similar to how you see here. So I think I simplified all of these titles a little bit too, because they're a little bit long. So I just have this one as total fertility, and then there's that group. So you can download each one of these tables just like this. Does not take long to do. And then we have all the data. So if I take the next one, maybe I'll just do 2 of these, and then show you a little shortcut that you can do. So again, this goes to GitHub. I'm going to copy the contents of this data. I'll go back to my DataGraph file. Let me go to my new one that I'm working on. And now I want to paste this in. I don't want to be selecting anything in the table I already have here, because I'm not pasting over that. You can even unhide that group. And then if you want, you can just do Command V to paste, group this. And now this is the life expectancy. I'll just copy that, put that there. Again, I sort of like to simplify the names a little bit. Now, one of the things that you will find when you download this data is that it's not entirely consistent in how they refer to the country code that they use, this 3-letter code that refers to each country. And that's going to be kind of important for us to have these consistent, to make things easier for us. And in the version here, let me open the data slider again. What did I do? I just called everything country. So if I go back to my new file, so I'm going to change this from geo to country. I can just copy and paste. And I'm going to do that for all of my data, so that what is kind of the key, one of the things we're going to filter this data on when we combine all of these data sets, you will want to have these named the same. It just makes things more convenient. Now for the last couple, you can go ahead and download those as well if you want to do those from scratch. But one thing that's a really easy way to do this is actually you can get the data if you want to put it in a new file. So you can, again, sort of start from scratch by just going to my file, selecting these blocks, and I can copy those, go to my new file, And again, I'll just uncheck these. And now I will, oops, paste these in. So then I can I'll delete the ones that I did before. So you can just see all of this data now side by side. And again, all changed to have the country as the title for the name there. Okay, so the first three tables that we brought in are basically the same in terms of being every row is a country and year combination, and then we have the data. The last country that I brought in, or sorry, the last table is a list of all the countries. And so this gives us a unique list of country and name, and it also has other information in it that we're going to want to use. We're going to use the region. So the next thing that I did in my file is I basically just pulled the information I needed out of this table. So if I click on my titles and hold the command key, I can select from my country data the columns that I need. Let's see, here it is. World for region is the one that I use. So I have these three selected, and I just copied those columns and put those in a brand new table. So this is just I just thought this was an easier way to do this. This is the table that I'm going to use to have all my variables pulled together into. And what did I call it? Yeah, same thing, all data. Okay, oh, and I guess the other thing I just did was I put a vertical column divider here to show the difference between these. So, so now in this simple file, now I have all the data downloaded. Next, I need to combine all these tables together so that I have this table of values that again will be interpolated based on the year. It'll pull a value based on the year. And it's going to be, because the raw data itself is discrete in terms of a single value per each year. Now, actually, the old way they used to have this data was, I believe it didn't have every year represented here. So they've already done some interpolation and prep of this data. But to really get the smooth animation, we need to have it be able to interpolate perfectly between each year as the animation is moving. So how do we do that? Well, we have a special column type that is called interpolate by category. You go under the other menu, say interpolate by category. Again, here's the one that we're going to choose. And now we need to populate this this category. So what I need to do here is two things. I need to define my input, and I need to evaluate the data at a particular location. So first of all, by defining the input, what does that mean? Well, that's these tables here are the input. So this total fertility table, for example. So in this case, my category is country, and I can just drag and drop. I'm going to be interpolating the year, and my data is the child fertility. My category that I'm evaluating at is coming from my all data, and my value of X, where I'm interpolating this, you can see how this is already populated, is whatever T is. Now I haven't actually set up the value for T yet. This is the year variable. And if I want to just quickly know what the years are for my data, I can click a data column that has year, and I can see from my quick graph that this goes from 1800 to 2100. So one quick way to set this up is just to say from 1800 to 2100. Now I have my animation variable set up so that when I change this, here we go. It's going to go ahead and interpolate the data. And so this is the first one. This is the fertility. So I can just put these names here. And once I have one of these interpolate by category columns set up, now it's easier to do the other ones. What I always do is often an option drag that makes an exact copy. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it for life expectancy. So let's show that data. And I can expand out this copy here. So now I need to just make sure I replace all of the input columns. I'll do the same thing, option drag for population. And so let's hide this one. So you can see this, is a little bit of setup, but it is not, it's not a tremendous amount of work because now I have it set up. So now I have my my data is being interpolated, and this is again sort of the first step of this. This is the getting the data and preparing the data. So now that I have this in this combined table, and what I often do always is sort of like to double check my data to make sure that I've done everything correctly. But one of the easiest ways to double check this is actually just to plot it. So to do that, and this now gets us to really the second step, plotting and animating the data. I want to plot my fertility versus life expectancy. But again, I'm using these interpolated values that are pulling based on whatever my value of my animation variable is. So right now my animation variable says 1988. So my data that's in this table would be the values for 1988. So if I have selected these, I can go ahead and plot that data. And well, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Actually, I wanted to do the points. So let me go ahead and instead of doing this as a plot, let's use it in a points command. That's kind of a shortcut on the gear menu here from the plot. It is sort of interesting just to see the connections, but that's not really what we want to see. So let's just delete that one. Now I have my points. So this is the first graph, right, where I have everything being plotted and it's moving. But there's one issue here, and that is that whenever I'm doing an animation, I need to make sure my X and Y ranges are not changing as I'm animating my data. And so what I need to do is go ahead and set those based on the total range of all the data. So let me go and look at, for example, the fertility, which is our, that's our y-axis. I want to do this for all of my variables. So if I go to my fertility, for example, I can right click on the column header, and then there are some shortcuts here for pulling the maximum and the minimum values from each of these. So I just pulled the max value, and in the example file I put these in groups, but I think I'll just leave these here for now so you can see them. So here's my max fertility that you can see. If you open this up, it'll show you it's pulling the max. Again, once I create one, I usually just do a option drag, and now I'm going to do the minimum. Can change that. And I need to do the same thing for the life expectancy. So I can take this and do another option drag. So this will be, we'll call this one LE for life expectancy, the max and the min. If you open these up, now I need to change what group this comes from. And I'll do the same thing here. So now I have the max and min of all of my data, and I can put that into my axis settings in the include section. So I want this to be one of the data points in my in the graph as it's set up. So I would have my, let's see, my X here. Actually, let me add the X label. and the Y label so you can see which is which. Oh, these have underscores in them which show up. So let me just remove those. Life expectancy, or actually another way to do that is just to, you can click on this and say to ignore the underscore so it doesn't treat it as a, as though it is a, here we go, as though it's meant to be a superscript or subscript. Okay, so now we have our life expectancy, we have our fertility, and if I want to do the include on these, then I can take the life expectancy value, for example, on my Y. So I'll have my min, and then I'll have my max, and I can do the same thing here. So this one will be, again, I do a lot of copying and pasting when I do this. So I have my min fertility and my max fertility. Now that you have that set up, you can play the animation and you're not going to see that jitter. Okay, so that's my points and my actual animation. Let's keep this moving while I do the next part. So once I have this set up, I can go ahead and go to my thumbnail and I'll clone it because I want to just show you again these steps similar to how they are in the example file. And the next thing that I want to do is I want my size of my points to change as I, run my animation. So let's go ahead and again, we'll look at our data. So here's the population, and that's what I want to base the size on. So if I change this to the size to be based on whatever the value is for the population, initially you don't see anything because it just needs to, these are very big numbers, and I need to make this a much smaller scaling factor. So what the scaling factor does is it's literally taking whatever the value of the population is, multiplying it by whatever number is right here, and then that's the point size for my points. So because I've done this a bit, no, that's a little bit, maybe something like this, or 0.002 I think is reasonable for now. Okay, so now we have all of these things and they're scaling, and let's see, I am going to, actually it doesn't look like my scaling is 100% correct here right now. Let me stop my animation. This is of course the beauty of doing everything live, right? So if I have, these do all look correct. Yeah, these should be scaling a little bit. I know the way that the points should look. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, so this is one of the ways DataGraph is very helpful in terms of debugging. So when I selected the population that I'm scaling based on, I selected the raw data population, and I know that these points should be getting bigger over time. So instead, it's just picking one value and keeping it the same. I need the population value that's coming from my all data group. And I have my little green arrow over there to help me find that. Now what you see is the population scaling the way that it should. So I have countries where they're smaller, and then they're getting much larger. The next thing that we're going to do is now add in the color scheme. And I do that also from my points command. I can then, what I'm going to do is actually change the fill color. And I want to base that on the world region that's in my all data group. There we go. So once I select the column, then I can create the color scheme, and it will do that for me automatically. I can give it a name. Oops. just call this one color for now. What I did in the example file is I actually matched the colors to the color used in the GapMinder animation. Not hard to do. You can go into these tiles here, and if you click on one, then it brings up the color picker, and you can either, if you know the hex code you want, you can do that under the RGB section. Here's where you can put in a hex code for a specific color, or you have this eyedropper that you can use and click on a color somewhere to get the appropriate color for your points. Okay, so now I have these three, and again, I'm using the points command. The points command doesn't know anything about an animation. It's just plotting whatever I have within my data table and changing it depending on what my animation variable is. Now this one is moving pretty fast, so you have the ability to change the duration of this variable, of the what it's being animated based on, so that it can move much slower. And even while it's running, I can still click the slider and sort of move it around. Okay, so the third part of this is then taking now my final graph and doing some formatting on this to get what I showed you in my example file. And I'm not going to have time to do all the formatting, but let me show you a little bit before we'll see if anyone has any questions about anything. And looks like there might be some inappropriate messages on the chat that I'm not sure if you guys are seeing that. But anyway, so how would I take this raw file, raw image, raw animation, and make this a little bit more formatted? Well, first of all, again, I always like to clone things to, have something to not mess up what I've already done. And then we're going to go ahead and size this. I tend to often, for things like this, I just use the Twitter size in case I decide to put this on Twitter. So 1200 by 675, for example, is that size. Now, I don't know, in the example file I gave you, let's see, what size did I use? Yeah, that is what I did. So if we go back to here, and I guess what I did here is I also made a list of all the things that I did. What did I do? I sized the graphic, so I just showed you that. I added the margins. So if we go back to the one I'm working on, notice here, well, I also clearly made the font size a little bit bigger, but the margins themselves are now still all automatic. So I can go into my canvas settings, and I can, start to add some specific margins, maybe a little bit more here, to format my graph to get that in the center. One of the other things I guess that's important to add that I want to make sure I show you is how do I add the legend, because right now you don't have that. So to add my legend, I'll do that under the, you can click the label menu, or if you go under the command menu here, this is a custom legend. So that adds, you see a little element, but it doesn't actually say what is being placed in there. This is where you have a lot of flexibility as to what's in this legend. But this is the only way that you can add the color scheme variable that we created down here in as an item. Whoops, I added two of them. We only need one. And now we have the region shown. So that's another one of the things that we're going to do. So if I go back to what I did here, I added major grid lines, I removed tick marks, and I set my box style to only axis. So you can see, again, the formatting here has all these little elements. To add grid lines, you can just right click on your graph and you can add X and Y grid lines. If you want to format them more exactly, then we can go into, I'll close that. You can go into the style settings and change, for example, the grid line into solid lines. And I think here I just made it like a gray color to look like that. If you want to remove the tick marks, you just set this to none in the style settings. And the box style, if you just want it on the only axis, then you'll see the box style like that there. So now this is more and more starting to look like the version that you see here. A couple of other really important elements. The year. How do I do that? Well, that's just using a text command, and the text command here is just a very large. And if you wanted to, again, this file has all the options are in it, so you can see that this is set to a specific font size, Courier. And the reason for that, that's sort of important, is that you don't want the year itself to be jittering back and forth. So if I go to my example that I'm working on and I add a text command, so this adds the object that is my text label that has all these different formatting options. I'm going to want to make this, much larger than that text. Now I can scale from the default up to 80%, but that's not enough. So for this is one of these circumstances where you just want to specify what the font is, because it's also going to be different than what our main font is for this graph, where the main font is currently Helvetica. So if I change font into specify and I click on this, then I get the list of all the fonts that are in the system. And if I just, again, wanted to make this a very, very large font, I also need to change it from just being text and to actually put the animation variable in it. So you go ahead and click to the right of this entry box. That gives you a list of all the variables that are available. And I clicked my T variable and I hit enter. Now I have my year. I would want to put this in the center of my graph, so align it in the center. But if for a lot of fonts, they will sort of, you see that little jiggle that it did? That's because the Helvetica is not a font that all the numbers have an equal amount of space that they take up in terms of pixels. But if I change this to Courier, which is somewhere in here we go, Courier, now it's going to be stable. You won't see any jiggle within the numbers. So that's one of the things that I do. Now I'll also make this kind of a lighter gray color, and so now we have something that's really starting to shape up and looks more like an animation that we might want to show to someone. So let me just point out again that if you go into the example file that I have online, there are all the steps, not for this one, but in making the bubble graph. Oh no, sorry, I'm on the right tile. All the steps that I did are outlined here. I don't necessarily show you exactly the method that I do everything. This is definitely a more advanced example, but you can go through and you can see how this is created. I also have the instructions on how I created this status bar, which is just its own graph that is then included in my final version as a graphic down at the bottom. Now, for any of these, you can also just hover over the command and it will, give you some information on which command it is. And let's see, what else did I want to show you? I think that's sort of getting to the end. I know, I always think I'm going to get through everything I want to get through, but sometimes that doesn't quite work out. So does anyone have any questions that they have? And I think we can chat a little bit back and forth, because I do think that there shouldn't be too much of a latency between. I'll keep going a little bit and show you a couple of other things that I think are very cool about this. And if anyone has a question, then please, feel free. So the two elements that I added into this graph that I thought were kind of an interesting addition to the standard GapMinder, besides the status bar itself, were the ability to have the set variable where I can select which regions of the country I include. And I thought that this was, again, makes the animation even more useful to be able to explore it like that and use it in presentations like we talked about before. So how would I add one of these set variables? Let me just go ahead and actually swap this back again and show you, add in my data list, because it's going to pop up over here. So if I create this, I can do this. I mean, any of these you can create from the other menu, but to have it created more automatically, we're going to use the mask functionality of our points command, and we're going to be masking using the all data group based on the region that we have one of those columns in there. And then once we have that column selected, then we can select the type of mask. And options are here for whether this is a number or a text, but the one you want to select is the inset. Then you have to just create the set, okay? So what does that do? That creates this variable over here on the left-hand side, and now you can see just a little checkbox for each region is included. And if I uncheck these, then it's going to remove those from, from my view. So it's kind of gives us an interesting way, again, to be able to explore the data a little bit more. Now, the other thing that I did was this population-based label, and that I was sort of happy with, because I played with, what would be a good way to add labels into these, into the animation. And what I, after some kind of playing with different options, what I decided to do is to add an additional column into my table, which is a mask column. So if you want to do that, you go into the other menu, you select mask. That adds this additional column. Actually placed it right in here within my data group. And for a mask column, you have two things you need to do. Say what you want what is the input to the column that it's going to show. So in this case, it's the country name that I want to show. And notice that you do have to specify the data type. So if they don't match, just say that it's a text. Now I see all the countries of the world, but I only want to see them when my population is a certain value. So I can say if population is greater than, for example, 1 million, then you see in the data table, here's my label. And so not every, country is going to be shown here. And I can say 10 million, and now I see even less countries being shown. And that's sort of what you want for these labels, because otherwise they're going to be overwhelming. So then within my points command, what I need to do is then I can use this label column directly, and I can just drag and drop that right there. Now I see the labeled countries. What I also did is the default is that the label is off to the side of the point. You can leave it like that. Again, you can make this a little bit more to show less labels. What I found and decided I liked the best was to show this actually in the center. So you can format your label to say you want it in the center of the point. Notice though, when you do that, you do still have this offset that is in there by default. So I set that to 0, 0. Now I have my my animation where again the label is popping up for each country as it gets to a certain size. And even when you have a good bit of them, because it's moving, I feel like you can, sort of see pretty well what they are. Now with this color scheme, not so much though. There's a couple of these colors that are a little too dark. We can always change into lighter colors. Again, you could use the colors that I chose. And one nice thing about DataGraph is that you can always I can go to this version. So this is the version that's online. This is the one that has, this nice color scheme set up. I can click on the object that is the color scheme variable. I can copy that, go into the one I'm working on here, and then I could just paste that color scheme object into my new file. And instead of using the color scheme that I, sort of created on the fly, I can go ahead now and switch back to this one. Now, when you do that, notice though, the color scheme variable is in the legend is independent of what's coming from the command. So you do have to go in and change that here as well to make sure that those match. Okay, well, we've filled our 45 minutes. I see no questions, but thank you. Yeah, play around with it definitely, and see how you do. I appreciate everyone who attended. Definitely, if you trying this for yourself and you have any questions, please let me know. I'm actually very curious. If you download this version that I have with all of the instructions in here, are you able to recreate what I did? How possible is that? Hopefully it's not too bad. I will say that for someone, if you're brand new to the program, I'm giving the steps that I used to create this. I broke down step by step what I did. I don't necessarily tell you, if I say add a, what here, for example, add a variable or add a mask. I'm not saying step by step necessarily how to do that. So if you have any questions on any of these individual steps as to exactly how to do them, if you're new, then definitely let me know, or you don't have to be new. If you're just not sure, then let me know. So thanks so much, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. I hope that you have a nice weekend. I hope that this wasn't too confusing for anyone. And I really do hope that you're able to create these for yourself. I think the main thing to remember is, again, just double checking that things make sense, that you've got the right connections, and visualizing the data is one of the best ways to do that. In fact, this was a good test of that for myself. I did make one mistake as I was creating it, and you can see how I was able to, use the program to very quickly debug that and figure out that I had initially selected the wrong column. So thanks again, everyone. And I will go ahead and let's see. For a moment, I'm stumped on how to actually end the live broadcast. Okay, here we go. I am getting better at this, I think, but I'm still not perfect. So we'll go ahead and end now.